The crystal chamber floated 300 meters above Geneva, impossible and beautiful. Ambassador Wei had stopped trying to understand the physics of it. The alien technology that built the Universal Military Court in 72 hours made human engineering look like children playing with blocks. She stood at the center of the massive room, alone. Above her, the judges sat in a curved arrangement that seemed to defy gravity. 17 species, each stranger than the last. Some had too many eyes, others had none at all. The delegate looked like a tree made of light. The judge resembled a floating crystal formation that hummed with consciousness. His earpiece translated their whispers in real time. None of the words were kind. "Murderers," said one voice. "They're still killing each other even now," said another. "Quarantine is too gentle. Elimination would be mercy to the galaxy." Kept her face calm. She had practiced this for weeks. Earth's entire future rested on the next 3 days. Humanity had been so excited when the first alien ships arrived. First contact. The dream of centuries. Then the Galactic Council had reviewed Earth's radio signals, television broadcasts, and internet archives. What they found horrified them. 6,000 years of recorded warfare. Weapons that could end all life on the planet. Nations that spent trillions on militaries while their own people starved. Humanity wasn't invited to join the galactic community. They were put on trial. Prosecutor stood to address the court. The alien moved like water, its translucent body shifting between states of matter. When it spoke, the translation came through cold and precise. "Honored judges, the evidence against humanity is overwhelming. We present Exhibit 1, the First World War. 16 million dead in 4 years. They fought in mud and blood over invisible lines on maps. Exhibit 2, the Second World War. 85 million casualties. They built factories dedicated solely to killing. Exhibit 3, the atomic bombings. 2 cities erased in seconds. Hundreds of thousands vaporized or poisoned by radiation." The holographic displays filled the chamber, forced herself to watch. She had seen these images before, but never like this. Never through alien eyes. The trenches of the Somme, the gas chambers of Auschwitz, the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima, napalm burning through Vietnamese jungles, drone strikes in the Middle East captured on grainy video. "They call themselves civilized," continued. "Yet in the past century alone, they have killed over 100 million of their own species. They possess enough nuclear weapons to destroy their biosphere several times over. They have used chemical weapons, biological agents, and systematic torture. They have committed genocide not once, but repeatedly." The delegate's light pulsed angry red. This species represents everything the Galactic Council opposes. They are a threat to all peaceful civilizations. I move for immediate quarantine and technological regression protocols. Several judges indicated agreement. Hands trembled. She clasped them behind her back. The judge, the eldest and largest, chimed a single note. Silence fell immediately. When it spoke, the crystal formation resonated with authority. "The court recognizes the severity of the charges. However, we are bound by our charter to thoroughness. Does the defense wish to present its case?" Stepped forward. Her voice echoed in the vast chamber. "Yes, Your Honor. Humanity requests the court examine not only what we did, but why we did it. Context matters. Circumstances matter. We don't deny our history. We ask only that you understand it." His form rippled with something that might have been contempt. "Context cannot justify atrocity, Ambassador. Your species' violence speaks for itself." "Then let it speak completely," replied. "Let us present the full story. 3 sessions. That's all we ask. If after hearing everything this court still finds us guilty, we will accept your judgment." The judges conferred in a language the translators couldn't decode. The wait felt eternal. Finally, the judge chimed again. "The court will grant humanity 3 sessions to present its defense. However, be warned. We have seen the evidence of your wars. The burden of proof lies with you to demonstrate why this species deserves anything other than isolation. Bode, thank you, Your Honor. We begin tomorrow. That night sat in her hotel room overlooking Geneva. The city lights reminded her of stars. Somewhere up there, 17 species were deciding humanity's fate. She thought about her daughter, 8 years old, who had asked if the aliens were nice. Had said yes. Now she wasn't sure if that was true. Her phone buzzed. Messages from the defense team. Dr. James had arrived from Lagos. Doctor was preparing her presentation. General Sarah wanted to review the strategy one more time, and their final witness had confirmed he was strong enough to testify despite his age. Looked at photo. 94 years old, a survivor of Hiroshima, a peace activist who had dedicated his life to nuclear disarmament. If anyone could make the aliens understand, it was him. But would it be enough? The next morning, the chamber filled again. This time, human observers sat in designated areas. The Galactic Council had allowed media coverage. Every news network on Earth was broadcasting live. 4 billion people watching their species on trial. Doctor took the floor. He was a tall man with kind eyes and gray hair. He had spent 40 years studying military history. He had written books condemning war. But today, he was here to explain it. Honored judges, he began, I want to show you something. The holographic display changed. It showed Earth from space, beautiful and blue. Then it zoomed in on Europe, the year 1241. Mongol armies swept across the continent like a tide of fire. This is the Mongol invasion, said. The largest contiguous land empire in human history. They conquered everything they touched. Entire cities were erased. Millions died. They reached the gates of Vienna. If they had continued west, European civilization as we know it would have ended. He paused, letting the images speak. Burning cities, refugees fleeing. The historical records showed the devastation clearly. European kingdoms had 2 choices, fight or die. They chose to fight. They lost most battles, but they fought anyway because there was no alternative. The Mongols didn't want tribute or submission. They wanted total conquest. So Europeans developed new military tactics, better fortifications, stronger alliances, not because they loved war, but because they loved survival. The judge's crystals shifted. Why not relocate? Your planet had vast empty spaces. Nodded as if expecting this. Where would they go? The Mongols controlled the Asian steppes. The seas were with their technology, and even if they could flee, they would abandon everything. Their homes, their farms, their sacred sites, their dead. Humans are deeply connected to place. Our identities are rooted in the land. To abandon it is to lose part of ourselves. He changed the display again. Now it showed the 1930s and 1940s, the rise of fascism. This is harder to explain, said quietly. Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan weren't responding to invasion. They were the aggressors. They believed in racial superiority. They built industrial systems designed for genocide. They started a war that killed 85 million people. Interjected, you prove our point. Humanity's capacity for evil is boundless. Yes, agreed. But here's what matters. Other humans stopped them. The Allied powers fought not for territory or resources, but to stop an ideology that threatened everyone. British citizens endured bombing campaigns. Soviet soldiers died by the millions defending their homeland. Americans crossed an ocean to fight tyranny that hadn't directly threatened them yet. They fought because they understood that some ideologies cannot be reasoned with or appeased. He showed footage from liberated concentration camps. The judges fell silent. Even they could understand the horror. This is what we fought against, said. And yes, we committed terrible acts in that fight. The atomic bombs, the firebombing of cities, the brutality on all sides. War turns everyone into monsters. But the alternative was worse. A world where that evil went unopposed. So we fought and we won, and we built institutions to make sure it never happened again. The first session ended there. watched the judges carefully. Some seemed moved, others remained unmoved. The delegates' light had shifted from angry red to uncertain yellow. That was something. But they had 2 more sessions to go, and the hardest arguments were still ahead. Doctor stood ready for the second session. She was younger than, sharp-eyed and passionate. Her specialty was human rights law and revolutionary history. She carried the weight of humanity's moral evolution on her shoulders. "Honored judges," she began, "today I will show you something your species may not understand. Humans fighting humans to free other humans." The display showed Haiti, 1791. Enslaved people rising against their oppressors. The judges watched as the images depicted the brutal reality of slavery and the violent struggle for freedom. "This is the Haitian Revolution," explained. Enslaved Africans fought against French colonizers who treated them as property. They won their freedom through blood and fire. Was their violence justified? They thought so. They preferred death in battle to life in chains. She moved through history quickly but thoroughly. The American Civil War, where half a nation fought to end slavery while the other half fought to preserve it. The wars of decolonization across Africa and Asia, where occupied peoples fought for self-determination. The intervention in Rwanda, where the international community finally tried to stop genocide, and noticed's voice cracked slightly here, tried and failed because they came too late. "We don't always get it right," said. "Sometimes we arrive too late, sometimes we don't come at all. But the fact that humans fight their own species to protect strangers, to uphold principles, to stop oppression, doesn't that count for something?" The youngest judge, a named curiosity seeker, spoke for the first time. "It confuses us. Your species is simultaneously the oppressor and the liberator, the enslaver and the abolitionist. How can both exist in one species?" Smiled sadly. "Because we're complex. We're capable of great evil and great good, sometimes in the same person. Our history is a constant struggle between these impulses. The fact that good sometimes wins, that we've built systems and laws to encourage our better nature. That's the point. We're not perfect, but we're trying." Felt a spark of hope. One judge was asking questions instead of condemning. That meant they were thinking, considering, not just judging. The third and final session began with tension thick enough to cut. General Sarah walked to the center of the chamber. She wore her dress uniform, medals gleaming. She had fought in 3 conflicts, lost friends in combat, and spent her retirement trying to prevent future wars. If anyone could explain the paradox of deterrence, it was her. "Honored judges, what I'm about to show you will seem insane," said bluntly. Because it was insane, but it worked. The display showed 2 nations, the United States and the Soviet Union. Maps illustrated their sphere of influence covering half the globe. Then it showed the weapons. Thousands of nuclear missiles, each one capable of destroying a city. "This is the Cold War," said. From 1947 to 1991, 2 superpowers aimed enough weapons at each other to end human civilization. They built bombs that could crack continents. They put them on submarines, on planes, in silos buried underground. The total destructive power was enough to kill every human being several times over. The delegate's light flashed angry red again. "You built weapons to destroy yourselves. This proves you're mad." "Yes," agreed. "It was madness. But here's the thing, we never used them, not once. Because both sides understood that if either launched their weapons, everyone would die. Not just the enemy. Everyone. The attackers, the defenders, innocent civilians everywhere. Nuclear winter would have choked the planet, so we didn't fire. The weapons were too terrible to use." She pulled up classified documents, years ago. Incident after incident where the world had come within minutes of nuclear war. A flock of geese mistaken for missiles on radar. A training tape accidentally loaded into a warning system. A Soviet officer who refused to launch despite computer readings showing an American attack. "We came so close," said quietly. "So many times, but each time someone chose not to pull the trigger. because they knew what it would mean. And gradually, over decades, we learned to talk instead of fight. We built hotlines between capitals so leaders could communicate instantly. We negotiated treaties to reduce weapons. We created inspection systems so each side could verify the other wasn't cheating. The weapons that were designed to destroy everything ended up preserving peace. Form rippled with agitation. You call this peace, living under the threat of annihilation. No, said, I call it deterrence, and I call it the longest period without a great power war in human history. Yes, there were proxy conflicts, smaller wars in other regions, but the major powers, the ones with the weapons to end everything, never fought each other directly, because they couldn't afford to. She changed the display one more time. It showed the present day. Nuclear arsenals reduced but still present. International organizations like the United Nations, imperfect but functioning. Treaties and agreements, some honored, some broken, but always renegotiated. We're not proud of the Cold War, said. It was a terrible time, but we survived it. And more importantly, we learned from it. We built institutions designed to make war less likely. We created international courts, peacekeeping forces, diplomatic channels. Are they perfect? No. Do they always work? No. But they exist because we recognized that our weapons had become too powerful. We scared ourselves into cooperation. The session ended. Watched the judges leave to deliberate. There was nothing more to do now but wait. Hours passed. Sat with her team in a waiting room. Was reviewing his notes, though there was nothing left to present. Stared at her hands. Stood by the window, watching the sun set over Geneva. And who had been scheduled as their final witness dozed in a chair. He had prepared his testimony, but they might not get a chance to use it. Finally, a chime echoed through the building. The judges were ready. The chamber felt different this time. The air itself seemed charged with importance. Took her place at the center. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the aliens might hear it. The judge spoke first. The court has reviewed all evidence. We have debated extensively. This case has proven more complex than anticipated. Held her breath. However, before we deliver our verdict, prosecutor has requested to make a final statement. Flowed forward, braced herself for condemnation, but the prosecutor's voice came through the translator differently this time. Softer, almost sad. Honored judges, I must confess something, said. My own species, the harmonious collective, has long presented itself as inherently peaceful. Our historical records show 10,000 years of tranquility, but I have done something forbidden. I have accessed our sealed archives, the records we do not share even among ourselves, and I discovered that my ancestors were not always harmonious. A murmur ran through the chamber. This was unexpected. 300,000 years ago, we fought wars as brutal as anything humanity has committed. We nearly destroyed ourselves. The survivors made a choice. They would genetically modify future generations to be less aggressive, less violent. They succeeded. We became peaceful, but we also forgot what we were. We judged humanity for being where we once stood while pretending we had always been enlightened. Turned toward, I have prosecuted you unfairly, Ambassador. Your species stands accused of violence, but at least you remember your wars. You teach them to your children. You build memorials to the dead. You let the memory hurt so you won't repeat it. My species chose to forget. I am not certain which approach is wiser, but I know that judgment without understanding is cruelty. The chamber erupted in discussion. Judges speaking over each other in languages the translators struggled to process. Stood frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. The judge's chime cut through the chaos. Order. We will hear the defense's final witness, then render our verdict. Nodded to, the old man stood slowly, leaning on his cane. He walked to the center with careful steps. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. My name is. I was 8 years old when the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. I was far enough from the center to survive, but close enough to see things no child should see. Shadows burned into walls where people had stood. friends who died slowly from radiation sickness. A city turned to ash in seconds. The holographic display showed archival footage. The devastation was total. I do not defend what was done to my city, continued. I cannot. Too many died. Too much was destroyed, but I will tell you what happened after. The Americans who dropped the bomb, some of them came to Japan years later. They met with survivors. They wept with us. They carried guilt for the rest of their lives. Both sides suffered and both sides had to live with what they had done. He paused, gathering strength. I spent my life working for peace. I traveled the world speaking about the horror of nuclear weapons. I met other survivors, other victims of war from every conflict. And everywhere I went, I found the same thing. People who wanted peace but couldn't see how to achieve it without first going through war. The soldiers who fought in my country's wars, they didn't want to kill, but they thought they had to. And afterward, they built monuments so we would remember. They created laws so it wouldn't happen again. They taught their children that war is the last resort. Looked up at the judges. Can your species say you earned your wisdom? Did you pay for peace with suffering? We did. Every human alive carries the weight of our history. We know what war costs because we've paid the price over and over. And yes, we still have conflicts. Yes, we still make mistakes, but we're trying. Every day we're trying to be better than we were. Isn't that worth something? Silence filled the chamber. Saw something she hadn't expected. Several judges had lowered their heads or dimmed their lights or shown whatever gesture their species used for respect. The judge chimed softly. The court will deliberate now. We will return with our verdict shortly. The wait was agony. Satwith holding the old man's hand. He smiled at her. Whatever happens, we told the truth. That's all we can do. An hour passed, then another. Finally, the judges returned. The judges' crystals glowed brightly. The Universal Military Court has reached its verdict. After extensive deliberation and consideration of all evidence presented, we find as follows. Throat closed, this was it. Humanity stands accused of excessive violence, cultural militarism, and crimes against sapient life. The evidence of your wars is undeniable. The suffering your species has inflicted upon itself is staggering. However, context matters, circumstances matter, and most importantly, growth matters. The judge's crystals shifted through colors. Your wars, while horrific, were fought for legitimate causes: survival, freedom, protection of the innocent, opposition to evil ideologies. Even your deterrence doctrine, though dangerous, prevented larger conflicts. You did not fight for sport or conquest alone. You fought because you believed you had to, and afterward you mourned what you had done. Felt tears on her cheeks. Therefore, under the principle of legitimate causation and demonstrated moral growth, this court exonerates humanity of the charges. You are not war criminals. You are survivors who learned from survival. You are not perfect, but you are trying. And that is enough. The chamber erupted in sound. Some judges celebrated, others protested, but the verdict was final. The judge wasn't finished. However, this exoneration comes with both a warning and an offer. The warning: your capacity for violence remains. You must remain vigilant. The systems you have built to prevent war must be strengthened and maintained. The offer: precisely because you understand war's true cost, we invite humanity to serve on the Universal Peacekeeping Corps. Who better to prevent conflict than those who have seen its worst? Could barely speak. We accept both the warning and the offer. 2 weeks later, stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The hall was packed. Ambassadors from 17 alien species sat among the human delegates. She read the verdict aloud, her voice carrying to billions watching around the world and across the stars. There were celebrations in the streets, but also quiet moments of reflection. Humanity had been judged and found worthy, but the weight of history remained. The dead still needed to be honored. The lessons still needed to be remembered. In a private meeting afterward approached, the alien's form seemed different, less rigid. I owe you an apology, said. My species forgot our past and judged yours harshly for it. Perhaps the question isn't whether a species has known war, but whether they learned from it. Nodded. Then maybe we can help other species learn without having to go through what we did. That would make all of it mean something. 6 months later stood on a space station orbiting a distant world. Two alien civilizations were meeting for the first time. Tensions were high, border disputes, resource conflicts, the same old patterns that led to war. But this time, humanity was there, not as conquerors or warriors, but as mediators, as teachers, as the species that knew what happened when diplomacy failed and guns took over. Watched a young human diplomat explain the concept of compromise to two alien leaders. She thought about everything her species had endured to reach this moment. All the wars, all the suffering, all the hard-won wisdom purchased with blood. Maybe it had been worth it. Not the wars themselves, never those, but what humanity had become because of them. A species that understood peace not as the absence of conflict, but as the hard work of choosing cooperation over violence every single day. Humanity had been exonerated by the Universal Military Court, but the real verdict would come from what they did next, from whether they could help others avoid the mistakes that had cost humanity so much. Looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species faced the same choices humanity once had, and now, for the first time, they wouldn't have to face them alone. The teachers of peace, born from the crucible of war, that was humanity's role now. That was their redemption. And intended to make sure they lived up to it.